Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have guest Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. Great to
Thank you,
have you.
Sasha. Glad to be here.
And Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, nice to be here.
And founder of the network, Nick Poliveda. Welcome to the show, Nick.
I'm innocent.
Okay, so finally we are all together because last Friday we had only not even half of the people, probably even less. But anyway, we did the show the best we could. But today, if you have video, why don't we start this the video?
Okay. Yeah, I have a.
Well, it was about 5 days ago at 3 o'clock in the morning, and this is the sound of Russian attacks against Kiev. Yeah,
it's a special video actually in audio format mostly, and it shows the experience which citizens of Kiev got not only on that day but during several last days. And you've heard that the air raid siren started after the explosions. This is a really simple reason, because during last missile attacks on Kiev, Russia uses mostly their ballistic missiles, which are fired from the Russian border, and the time for which they're flying from Russian border to Kiev is about 3 minutes. So unfortunately, those missile attacks are identified too late, and not always people are available to get to the bomb shelters, because they just have no time to get to bomb shelter. You need to have at least 5 minutes to get here, and this actually kind of another kind of terror against the citizens of Kiev. Kiev is not on the front line, is not on the battlefield. It's inhabited by peaceful people, and Russian Federation is using their missile attacks as a weapon of terror, and they're using ballistic missiles, which in order for civilian population not to have any possibility to get to the bomb shelters fast. Hopefully, thanks to the Patriot air defense system, during their last attacks, all their missiles were shot down, and they were not unable to strike into their objects. But as we've discovered before, even the fragments, even the remnants of those missiles are dangerous, because it's several kilograms of deadly iron, sometimes of explosive, which will explode when fall down, and we don't know where these remnants can actually go down, and what can be the consequences of that.
Well, I'm wondering that about at least 500,000 people on both sides were killed during the last less than 2 years. Jonathan, what's your opinion? Was it worth for Russia to prevent Ukraine to become a member of NATO, to go into this horrible war, killing at least 300,000 of their own people and extremely large number of Ukrainians?
Well, Putin's miscalculation. You remember, Sasha, that Putin initiated this war against Ukraine in the belief that it was going to be a relatively easy victory. He was not anticipating a protracted war. He would have been an complete idiot, if he had and said, "Oh, I guess I'll go attack Ukraine anyway." No, he was anticipating a relatively easy victory, and that his nuclear arsenal would give him the leverage and the cover to conquer Ukraine without any interference from the West. He did not anticipate that his action would galvanize NATO. He did not anticipate that the United States would begin sending aid, not as much as Ukraine wanted, but they would begin sending aid to Ukraine, which would enable Ukraine to engage in a counteroffensive, the initial counteroffensive, which took back a good bit of that territory that Russia had occupied. And he did not anticipate the other actions that have not worked to Russia's advantage. And now Putin is trying to pretend that things are going his way. And some Western analysts are expressing anxiety about Ukraine's ability to resist. And they completely forget the experience of Ukraine and the Soviet Union at the end of World War II, in which the Ukrainians successfully resisted until 1954 in a guerrilla movement. And so if they were able to do that, Ukraine has been doing better than that, actually, on balance, in the war thus far. What people also overlook is that Ukraine is still very close to being able to sever the logistic and reinforcement link between Russia and Crimea. That has not changed. The Russians are still highly vulnerable to that, and analysts overlook that. They think that somehow the temporary interruption or possible reduction in aid to Ukraine is somehow going to tip the balance in Russia's favor. It is not. The Russians have already been forced to move their Black Sea fleet away from Odessa, away from the blockade. They do not control the Black Sea nearly to the extent that they did before. And so now there are several opportunities still under Ukraine's control, I contend, that will enable Ukraine, with the right timing and the right effort applied at the right time and the right place, to create an operational shift in the balance of power in the Ukrainian theater. And it will force Russia to either accept an armistice, is what I contend. They will accept an armistice, and if Ukraine manages to inflict a significant enough operational defeat, of which the isolation and reoccupation of Crimea would be the primary symbol, once that occurs, then the game changes once again in favor of Ukraine. So right now, and oh, by the way, Yvonne, you mentioned the Patriot system, the success of the Patriot system. Raytheon just recently announced the successful test of a ballistic missile defense system, one of their new ballistic missile defense systems, very similar to Israel's Arrow system. Now, this ballistic missile defense system, once it's even in test cases or for whatever, will be a superior addition to a ballistic missile defense system for Ukraine and for NATO as a whole. This is yet another component of what I would be recommending as the construction of a global ballistic missile defense system designed to ultimately neutralize Russia's nuclear arsenal, the one thing in their view which makes them a great power. So we have that, and the final step, what I would recommend, would be the expansion of the U.S. Space Force to its full potential. Give it a space fleet armed with lasers capable of intercepting ballistic missiles in their boost phase. That final component will create a system of interlocking shields around Russia, which will neutralize their ability to use their nuclear arsenal for military and political gain.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we're coming from the high-tech war to a very low-tech war.
Yes.
Just a couple things, Sasha, I wanted to add to Jonathan, and they're really important. First of all, that Russian Black Sea Fleet was removed not only from the Ukrainian coastlines, and they are not frightening Odessa region or Mykolaiv region anymore. They were removed from Crimea, which is actually, the recent satellite data, which was analyzed, shows that Russia removed almost all their ships from Crimea because they are afraid of Ukrainian being able to strike those ships either by the sea drones or by long-range missiles like the Scalp missiles provided by the France and the missiles provided by the Great Britain, or by air drones. So they removed the ships from
Storm Shadow.
Storm Shadow, they removed the ships from the Crimea, and which is just a huge defeat of Russian Federation in the Black Sea, because Crimea, Sevastopol, was their main base for Russian Black Sea, and now they can't use it. And it was a great mistake of Ukraine that during our previous years, when we seemed to be friends with Russia, we prolonged the agreement of Russian Black Sea to stay in Crimea, in Sevastopol, because Ukraine rented, before Russia annexed Crimea, Ukraine rented that base to Russia, and Russia actually blackmailed Ukraine by prices on gas in order to keep that military base and their base for their Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. Now they're not able to use it because it's unsecure. Ukraine already sunk several Russian ships in the Black Sea, including their flagman ship Moskva cruiser, and they are just afraid that the rest of their Black Sea will be sunk, and they will have no ships in Black Sea, because they are not able to bring there any new ships thanks to Turkey, which controls the Bosphor and is not allowing of Russian military ships to pass. And another important issue is regarding the Russian missiles and the Patriot systems, because Russia was persuaded, and their propaganda was persuading the whole world that they have so powerful and so modern missiles, like Kinjal missiles, which are unable to intercept. And if the world will confront Russia, then and those missiles are capable of delivering the nuclear warheads on them. So if NATO will confront the Russia, they will be able to strike the capitals of European cities with those missiles. and we've discovered that actually is not some kind of modern weapon, that it's easily interceptable with Patriot systems. And what is interesting that after Russia was unsuccessful in attacking the Kiev with their Kinjal missiles, or Dagger missiles, probably as they're known in English, the scientists who developed those missiles in Russia were arrested. So by arrest of those scientists, they actually confirmed that the power of their missiles was actually the power of their propaganda, like the power of Russian army, which they all telling about that it's the second most powerful army in the world.
Quick question to you. You mentioned that Russia rented the military bases for its fleet from Crimea, from Ukraine, and now they left Crimea. But do they still continue to pay rent?
Unfortunately, and they're not paying rent, and they're not paying fines because of those of their debt.
This is the commercial reason for them to be evicted, for non-payment of rent, right?
Yeah, and they have
Ukrainians will gladly oblige them.
Assets in the world, and after they will pay all the reparations for their unprovoked invasion to Ukraine, then probably we'll also ask Russia to pay a rent for those periods of time when they annexed Crimea. Thank you, Sasha, for a hint. I hope that Ukrainian lawyers are watching our show, or some really powerful lawyers in the United States, which can assist in future of taking that money from Russia as well.
Yeah. Also, to further reinforce Ivan's point, we should remember that 3 days and 79 years ago, the Germans, Nazi Germany, kind of surprised the West with its launching of the Ardennes offensive, what we call the Battle of the Bulge, and on December 16th. And the United States, for the most part, the Allies were not anticipating that the Germans were even capable of launching a counteroffensive at that point. And yet they did. And very nearly, they inflicted over 70,000 American casualties in that counteroffensive. So that so the lesson of that offensive for this current situation now is that Russia should not anticipate that Ukraine is not going to be able to launch some sort of surprise counteroffensive of its own during the winter, during what appear to be highly unfavorable conditions for a continued counteroffensive. If, again, the initiative is in Ukraine's hands, not Russia's. And so it has the capability or the possibility of severely disrupting Russia's subsequent offensive plans, or even changing the entire perceived military balance of power in the Ukrainian theater. So a nice historical lesson. It happened once before. It can happen again.
Yeah. Also, something that's really screwy that's going on here, Ivan, just in case you didn't know, that there are certain congressmen and senators in the United States that are tying in the aid to Ukraine with the border crisis down in Texas. Let me tell you, they have nothing to do with each other. But this is politics as usual in the United States of America. So they're saying, well, we need to do something about the border first. To my knowledge, we do not have a lot of Ukrainians crossing our border in Mexico to come to the United States for asylum.
But there are 20,000 Russians who are waiting to cross the border.
Okay, I wouldn't surprise if the Russians are.
No, Russia. No surprise there. Yeah.
Yeah, but also getting information from what's going on over there is extremely difficult. For example, Russia basically shut off all the media. Sasha somehow manages to get 2,000 people in Russia to watch the show. I don't know how, but according to
They
our
must love me.
according to our Vimeo thing, we got 2,000.
or we're all, otherwise we are all highly amusing.
Maybe we're highly amusing over in Russia, but there's about 2,000.
Or they are working in KGB and just monitoring our show.
Nick, I have an idea.
No.
Why wouldn't US make a deal with Ukraine that for all its help that it's providing and so on, Ukraine will arrange a small number of fighters, say probably 500 people would be enough, to bring them on Mexican border to recognize Russian people who are trying to cross into US, so they would be able to apprehend them, interrogate them, and probably punish them as well.
Well, here's
Maybe they will start with punishment.
Okay. These are the reports I'm getting, Ivan. The Russian, your friend Vladimir Putin, does not recruit his troops from Moscow and St. Petersburg. He runs to way out in eastern Russia,
Buryatia,
and grabs people that don't know jack about the war. They're usually Asian oriented. In other words,
they don't know Russian language.
They don't know Russian language. You're right. And so this is the reports we're getting, Ivan. And he sends those people on the front lines because he realizes if he took people from Moscow and they went to the front lines and they got killed, their bodies had to go back to Moscow. It would be political suicide for Vladimir Putin. So Vladdy, in his infinite wisdom, goes to Vladivostok and recruits people there who don't know anything about the war and sends them to the front. They get killed, obviously. You guys accommodate them. The body bags go back, and the people in Moscow and St. Petersburg just don't know the difference. In other words, and remember, the media shut off other than the 2,000 people that Sasha gets through. In other words, they don't know that they're being used in eastern Russia. In other words, they're not. It's not a real war. It's a way for Putin to get rid of people he doesn't want anyway. In other words, it's kind of their own internal ethnic cleansing, so to speak. Now, that's what we got from the U.S.
Okay. Go on.
Go on.
That's how it is with one very important issue, that they don't get the bodies back. The battlefield in Ukraine, they're full of Russian bodies, and they don't get those bodies back. When I see the videos from the battlefield from our soldiers, it's like in some horror movie, actually, because all those bodies are laying there, and hopefully now it's cold, but when it's warm in summer, it's just awful picture and awful smells. And the reason why Russia is not getting bodies back is that if they will reclaim the body of killed soldier, they will have to pay to the family of that soldier because he was killed. And while there is no body, this soldier considers as missing, and they are not paying for missing soldiers, so their families will not get any money for them being killed in Ukraine. So this is just about the money in the end. They are saving the money, and they are not getting the bodies of the killed soldiers because they don't want to pay to the families. So,
by the way, very interesting.
Everything is simple.
A few months ago, I remember there was a time when Russia was paying the widows of killed soldiers. They were paying a car. Was it some Lada, Russian-produced car? So one widow, she got this Lada, and the Lada was very unreliable car. It would stop or it wouldn't start, and it was just a lot of problems. Although it was a new car, But like in Russia, sometimes they're able to produce very low quality cars, and this was one of them. So she had the nerve to sue Russian government for a shoddy product. She's got,
Oh, well, good for her.
that
Hey,
was
speaking of suits, Sasha Navalny disappeared. Remember, he's the opposition leader in Russia.
Yeah.
Recently, this is a report we got. A Russian judge actually stepped to the table and said he wants to know the whereabouts of where this guy is. He's
because
been missing for
it's
weeks.
just just becoming weird what's happening there.
Yeah.
Jonathan, I would like to ask you a question. We have on a lot of our shows, we're discussing the situation in Israel and Gaza, and there are a lot of comparison of these two wars, Ukraine versus Russia and Gaza versus Israel, because essentially, if you look really deep inside, they are fighting Israel and Ukraine, essentially the same evil empire, which considers Russia, China, what's its name, Iran, North Korea, whatever it might be. But what's interesting is, if you look into really details, in Russia, Ukraine, the very strong, powerful, and much bigger country, absolutely without any reason whatsoever, attacked smaller, less populous, much less stronger country, which in first case we have a nuclear power country, second we have unfortunately non-nuclear country. Now in Israel, situation is it's so weird. It's a small fraction of Gaza, whether we treat Gaza as a country or it's a territory or it's whatever it might be. I'm not so sure. Okay, I call it Gaza, and you can interpret any way you want. However, that Gaza attacked a much stronger, much bigger nuclear-powered country with about 100 nuclear warheads. So if you will take issue of geopolitics as what is real politics issues are, according to our friend Professor John Mearsheimer, the stronger country must prevail over the weaker country, especially if weaker country attacked the stronger country, which is unheard of, but it's happened in case of Gaza and Israel. So what should be one outcome will happen sooner or later in Ukraine and Russia, and we will see it. But so far, there is a tremendous fight against stronger country by weaker country. So now, if you take real politics issue, you say, oh, you're a stronger country. Prove it right there, right now. Oh, you can't prove it. So you're not a stronger country, then go away. Okay? Now, in Israel and Gaza, one commentator voiced an opinion that, of course, Hamas never had a real plan to destroy Israel. They're not capable of doing that. It was not their plan. Their plan was martyrs. So all world will see Palestinian issue for what it is and so on. So they're martyrs. They're not. Okay. So now Israel started its attack following October 7th, attack against Gaza. Now, if they're martyrs, how come they're hiding behind civilians in these tunnels? Get your arms, get up, and fight Israelis. Or you want to just rape women, you want to take 84-year-old women in captivity, and you want to behead children? No, if you're fighters, especially if you're martyrs, get up of your holes, of your tunnels, and fight Israelis. No, you know what this picture shows? They are undressed, hands up, and they're coming to give themselves to Israelis. They're not fighters. They're not martyrs. What kind of garbage are these people are? How they could even think about starting attack against Israel, so monstrous attack. How you see it, Jonathan? I mean,
I'm getting used to the fact that you deliver very long introductions before getting to the finally. What do you think of that, Jonathan? Okay, I was waiting for the question to be finished here.
I
But
know.
essentially, what Hamas was, for lack of a better reason, Hamas was hoping to create a wider conflict, hoping to generate sympathy for their cause, inflict a terrorist attack upon Israel in order to take advantage of what they perceive as a great reservoir of anti-Semitic feeling among other nations of the world. In other words, to stir up trouble, to stir the pot and create trouble and instability. What they fail to recognize is the fact that in the United States, you have a very large Christian population, which sees, especially among the much more conservative evangelical Christians, who see the existence of Israel or the formation of Israel as a fulfillment of end-time biblical prophecy. In other words, this is the will of God being put into place in our time, and that to be pro-Israel is to be in accordance with God's will. So, given that, there's a very strong undercurrent of support for Israel within the United States, and this is what has enabled Israel to be a bulwark in the Middle East in defiance of the very large populations of Arabs who desire to see Israel cease to exist. And so here you have Hamas trying to stir up that anti-Semitic feeling in the world so they can tap into it and create further instability for Israel. And all Israel needs to do is just simply very firmly and resolutely reassert their right to exist by steadfastly eliminating the military means of the anti-Israel forces. In this, it's the elimination of Hamas as an effective entity. And it is going to take very determined action on Israel's part, but it is much more feasible for Israel to do this on its own than it is, say, for example, it would be for Ukraine to repel Russia on its own. And so, Ukraine needs to take advantage of the capabilities which it still has in order to strike selectively, asymmetrically at the Russian weakness. And if they can succeed in inflicting a major operational defeat upon Russian forces in the coming months, and I would be betting that it happens during the winter months, not in the following spring, if they can succeed in doing this, then the tables will be turned once again. And Ukraine will be in a much better position to compel the Russians, along with NATO and the US, to accept an armistice.
Agree. Ivan, how you see that Russia is mounting attacks after attacks in different regions, not just Avdiivka, but also many other regions. And so far, in spite of the huge firepower and aviation and so on, they're not really getting much ahead anywhere. How do you explain that?
It's first of all, it's bravery of the Ukrainian soldiers, because they're just keeping their positions till the death, because they know that if they will retreat, then Russia will occupy these cities, these villages, and we will see how Ukrainian civilians will be tortured, how they will be killed, how women will be raped, how they will kidnap Ukrainian children and bring them back to Russia and re-educate them to become their servants. And Ukrainian soldiers have no way to retreat, and even without the assistance, we will keep fighting. It's the only way. You mentioned the history of Ukrainian rebellion army, which was struggling against the Soviet Union 10 years after the end of the Second World War, and now the entire Ukraine is a great rebellion army, because we don't want to be enslaved by Russia again after we get our victory. So this is the first answer of your question. Another reason is actually the great assistance which we receive from our Western partners, the more modern weapons, which are more efficient than the old Soviet and modern Russian, so-called modern Russian weapons, which they're using. The advanced strategy and tactics of the Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian command, because Russians, they have only one available strategy: just go in front and don't consider any losses, like they're doing in Avdiivka and trying to do in other direction. They don't consider any losses amongst the soldiers. They consider people as unlimited resource in Russia, and then they can afford themselves to advance just using the soldiers. I've read recent reports from the battlefield, and those newcomers which they bring to the battlefield, they don't even have helmets and bulletproof vests. They're given orders to go and find themselves helmets and bulletproof vests on the fallen Russian soldiers to take them from their bodies.
That reminds me of what the Russian army did in World War I. They didn't have enough weapons. The soldiers were instructed to pick up the weapons of your dead comrades and go ahead and fight with that.
Yeah, but they
it didn't
always
pay off very well for them then.
Had enough people, and this is really really terrible that they don't consider their own people as people. They're considering them as pigs or cows or like some kind of animals which they can just send to slaughter, and in order that if they will send 1,000 of people, they will probably be able to achieve some advance. If 1,000 of people will be killed and not be able to achieve some kind of advance, they will send 5,000 of people. If 5,000 of people will fail, they will send 10,000, and it's just like a zombie hordes, zombie waves of people just coming, and that is terrible. So that's actually the reasons why they're not able to greatly advance while having a superiority in the air until Ukraine will receive F-16s, I hope, having superiority in manpower, having the equal number of artillery, and having the probably now the equal number of heavy armored vehicles.
Continue this strategy of sending 10,000 people and they're all killed. You send 20,000 and so on. It's a very old story. It's better for investment shows than this one, but anyway, I'll tell you what it is. One businessman had a fabulous business, and the stocks doing extremely well. So he's asking his stockbroker to buy 10,000 shares of his own company. He buys, and the shares went up from $120 a share. They went up to $160. Then a week later, he says, okay, buy me another 75,000 shares. Now they went up from 160 to 210. So every time he's buying huge number of shares and the stock going higher and higher and higher. So one day he phones his stockbroker and says, okay, buy me another 100,000. He says, I can't. Why? You already bought all your shares. There are no more shares available. So isn't it the same what's waiting Russia when you send 10 and 20 and then 40 and
Okay,
80?
you run out of people, can't breed anymore.
Okay, it's gone. We have no longer people left. Now you yourself have to go and fight.
Unfortunately, Sasha, they have a lot of people and a lot of people who are not asking any questions to their own government why they are why this war continues, why they are trying to grab territory of another country. What is the actually the reason for this war? What is the strategy? They just don't ask any questions. They go and try not to die, or at least when they will die, and they will be lucky enough to their corpse taken back to Russia, their family will receive some money. Until world buys Russian goods, until American companies and European companies are continue to work in Russia and pay taxes there, until Western countries, and not only Western actually, they're buying either the Russian oil or they're buying Russian oil via some kind of third countries like India, for instance. Russia will have enough money to continue this war, and Russia will have enough people to send as soldiers. Well, that's actually the hard truth of this war, and probably something had to be changed in the strategy, because Ukrainian soldiers, comparing to Russia, they are not unlimited. It's harder and harder to mobilize people in Ukraine to go to this war, and the cemeteries in Ukraine, they're full of fresh graves of flags, Ukrainian flags on those graves of the soldiers killed. And as long as this war will continue, then probably at some point we will not have. We will hopefully have enough weapons. We will hopefully have enough support from the Western countries, but we can lack of soldiers.
Well, I think that help is going to materialize fairly soon. At least Europe is considering all kind of action, and because there's some problem with Hungary, as you know, but even that will be overcome. And what I'd like to mention is when you were talking about Ukrainian resistance to Soviet Union for 10 years after the Second World War, it's not just people who had arms and actively resisted to Russian. It's very important that population, at least in Western Ukraine when they were based, they were very sympathetic to these fighters, Ukrainian fighters, and they were very hostile to the Soviet Union government, and that's why they supported them. They always have place where to spend the night, where to have food. They have all kind of support from the local population. And that's what is happening in Ukraine. And I hope it will be even more, that the all total population of Ukraine, unfortunately, it's a total war. Some people still hope that there will be some kind of a peace agreement or something like this. How you can make a peace agreement with a country that rulers of which are lying all the time, 100% of the time? You cannot trust even one word of what they're saying. Furthermore, another problem is no one in the world could guarantee that both sides, especially Russian side, will abide by the whatever peace agreement there is. So this is making remember that Zelensky made it into the law that no negotiations with Russia until Putin is in power is possible. So it's against the law to negotiate with Russian invaders. And it's kind of a tragic situation, because almost any war ends in peace, in negotiated peace, in some kind of peace agreement. And it's very, very difficult to see how it can happen with Russia. Jonathan, any thoughts on this?
As I've said before, you have two nations with politically irreconcilable goals. Russia desires that Ukraine cease to exist, essentially, by essentially surrendering its right to exist as sovereignty. Ukraine simply wants Russia to go away and will settle for nothing less than that. And so you have a situation where one nation, one side or the other, must be compelled through military operational defeat to give up its political objective of either survival or dominance. And the political will of both sides is very well established and very clear. And so from our perspective, the Ukrainians, the initiative lies with the Ukrainians. Their choice is clear. They must inflict a significant enough operational defeat upon Russian forces in order to be able to achieve at least an armistice. They are not necessarily going to be able to do this initially on the eastern portion of their front with the situation vis-a-vis the Russian forces there. The more easily attainable chance for Ukraine to achieve the necessary victory to compel a peace lies in the link between Russia and Crimea. The Ukrainians, thankfully enough, are close enough to that, thanks to them having driven back Russian Black Sea forces to the point where they no longer control that area. They have a chance to sever the link with firepower and or other military action, to sever the link between Russia and Crimea and isolate what Russian occupation forces remain in Crimea. Once that is done, Ukraine then has the opportunity to use its operational reserves that they still have not committed all of their reserves. They can use that to then attack the Russian occupation forces that would now be isolated, cut off from reinforcement and supply, cut them off, compel their surrender. Once those forces are cleared out and Ukraine has recovered the Crimea, now the balance of power has changed. And then Ukraine would be free to take whatever forces are freed up by its successful reoccupation of Crimea. They now can concentrate and shift those forces to the eastern portion of Ukraine, where then they would be able to further stymie any subsequent Russian offensives. And with the influx of new Western weapons and other types of weapons and reinforcements, there would be a chance for Ukraine to compel the Russians to accept an operational ceasefire and their withdrawal from the rest of Ukraine. That is my contention. That is how I see the situation. And as I say, just because it is now winter, it doesn't mean that Ukraine doesn't have the opportunity for seizing the initiative. The Germans did it almost 80 years ago. The Ukrainians can do it 80 years later.
Jonathan, thank you for your assessment. Thank you all for today's program. And I would like to see all of you on Friday with the new show and hopefully good news for Ukraine. Excellent. Bravo, Nick.
Thank you for the support.
There's our cheerleading section.
The cheerleading section.
Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Героям слава.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.